Imagine a Melbourne the size of New York City. That's not just a possibility, it's where we're headed. Melbourne's population is on track to hit 9 million people by 2050, and the ripple effects across the property market are going to be massive. So, in this episode of the Michael Yardney podcast, I'm joined by Brett Warren, National Director of Metropole, to unpack the remarkable population growth forecast for Melbourne and what that means for property investors. We're going to explore where all these people are going to live, what kind of housing will be in demand, which suburbs are best positioned to benefit, and why this might be one of the best long-term opportunities for quite some time. It's not just about the numbers, it's about planning, foresight, and putting yourself on the right side of future demand. So whether you're a seasoned investor or just starting on your journey, today's show may well reshape your next property move.
Welcome to the Michael Yardney podcast, where twice each week you will learn a number of new ideas regarding success, property investment and money in around 30 minutes. Our show is brought to you by Metropole, who specialise in helping you grow, protect and pass on your wealth through strategic property and wealth advice. Now here's your host, Michael Yardney, Australia's authority in wealth creation through property, who has been voted one of Australia's top 50 most influential thought leaders.
Welcome back, Brett. Now,
Thanks, Michael.
Brett, according to the original Plan Melbourne 2017 to 2050, Victoria's capital population was forecast to leap from 4.5 million, that was at the time then in 2017, to at least 8 million people by 2050. But more recently, updates by Planning Victoria suggest we're now hurtling towards 9 million mark, overtaking Sydney much sooner than anticipated. That's Melbourne, and Victoria's population will be 10 million by 2051. And that's faster than any other Australian capital city. Now, I know one of your favourite places in the world is New York. Did you ever think we'd be talking about Melbourne overtaking Sydney, let alone rivaling New York in size?
Michael, I had to have a chuckle the other day when I saw that as a headline. I thought you might have to dust the spare bedroom off if Melbourne's going to turn into New York.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, look, compared to what's happened in the last 5 years, it's a stark contrast, isn't it? Because that did come as a bit of a shock. I mean, the last probably 5 years, I don't think there's been a lot of people moving to Melbourne. We had the lockdowns; no one could move there from overseas, and even the regions there was nobody moving there. So growth has been fairly low and fairly limited in terms of population growth, but also capital growth as well. And Melbourne is fairly unique. It's a unique location. It's an international city. There's a lot of different cultures. There's a lot of different industries. There's not just a mining industry. There's the finances. There's services. There's IT. There's a lot of different hubs there. So I guess in one way it did come as a shock when I look back at the last 5 years, but I guess moving forward, I can certainly understand it when you dig deeper, and perhaps we can talk a little bit about that today.
Sure. Well, Melbourne did suffer more than most parts of the world during COVID and lost population. And why would you come to Melbourne, even from regional Victoria? Why would you come and be locked down when in regional Victoria for a number of years you at least had a level of freedom? But since then, since the borders have opened, Melbourne has been growing rapidly, particularly through migration, particularly through jobs creation. And I know you live in Brisbane and I live in Melbourne, but I'd say it's the most livable city in the world. We've got some great education institutions. And so, yes, we are getting more international students here. While they're here, they're spending money. They're buying iPhones, I guess, but they're buying coffee, they're buying food, they're buying furniture, they're helping grease the wheels of industry, and they're also actually helping local businesses as well. During COVID, when we didn't have those migrants, every restaurant in every shop, they actually had signs up looking for baristas, looking for servers. That's all changed now. So all these people are coming here. And boy, is Melbourne building a lot of infrastructure, Brett.
Yeah, well, like you said, it's not just the internal migration, it's also the external migration that people are moving back. And I guess we haven't seen a lot of that yet, and we haven't seen that translate to prices. But as we know, when people first move to locations and areas, I guess rent for a period of time first, get comfortable with where they want to live and their community and their work. So there's a bit to play out there. I think it's probably starting to turn. But Michael, the government also suggests we need 1.6 million homes by 2050, and that's a huge number. And let's face it, I mean, we're going to be nowhere near that number, are we?
100% right. We're not going to build anything like that. The point you made a moment ago is a really good one, though, that most immigrants come here, and straight Melbourne's population growth to that number is going to happen mainly from international migration rather than local interstate migration or population growth. And most of those rent for the first couple of years. What that means is over the last couple of years, we've had these migrants who are renting. In the next couple of years, more coming and renting. But that's going to create a huge demand for home buying in the next few years because they're coming to Australia with the aspiration of wanting to own a home. They're coming here to live in a country where they can live and own their own home. Many of them want comfortable living in apartments because that's what they're used to back home as well. So we are going to have to build new homes. Many of those are going to be medium density and high density accommodation, which only costs a lot more. But at the moment, we know there are builders' insolvencies, construction bottlenecks, government taxes, interest rates making it really hard for builders to make a profit. So at the moment, we're not going to build anywhere near the number of new homes that are going to be required. There's going to have to be some significant changes. So while I see Melbourne's growth as being good. My son Bryce has recently been to Tokyo, where I think he said there were 37 million people in that city, but it
Yeah.
works because
Yeah.
it's got the infrastructure, it's got the public transport network. So therefore, I don't think the size of the city matters as much as the facilities, the infrastructure, and the livability if the government gets it right, Brett.
Yeah, and that's the difficult thing, isn't it? And at the moment, they're just not getting it right, are they? And there's enormous pressure in Melbourne right now on rents. There's issues with rents and housing, and that's really just going to translate to prices, isn't it?
Yeah, we're already seeing that in many ways in rents going up, and it's a supply and demand thing. So Melbourne's prices haven't done well over the last couple of years. So there's lots of factors that affect property values. And so even though it's got the same interest rates as the rest of Australia, basically the same federal tax system, even though there are local taxes that have got some issues, there's been lack of confidence in our economy and lack of confidence in business growth. And so therefore we have had people leaving, going interstate, and we have had people not deciding to upgrade their home or move their home. The property market, we tend to think is like investors, but 70% of purchases are home buyers upgrading, downsizing, right sizing, and they put those decisions on hold for a long time, especially the higher end of the market. But as confidence returns, I think that's all going to push up property values. Melbourne currently is significantly undervalued. By that, I mean you can buy properties below replacement cost, below intrinsic value. You can't build new apartments for the price of apartments, established apartments now. And that's one of the problems. That's why they're not building many new apartments yet. Townhouses, I believe, are also going to be a big way that people are going to live, more compact blocks of land, but big accommodation.
Yeah, look, these people are probably favouring, I guess, place over the bigger space. But maybe we start to just talk a little bit about the locations and where will these people actually going to live?
Well, again, the government has got a plan. The government has made some urban planning, and what they're deciding is that they're going to want people to move into the middle ring suburbs and urban renewal rather than going further and further out. Now, as opposed to Sydney, which has got a lot of landlocked and can't grow as far, Brisbane, for example, can grow from Brisbane right through to the Gold Coast and eventually will all join up. Melbourne, if it tries hard enough with all the flat land, can go out west all the way to
Yeah.
Adelaide if we try hard enough. But that's too expensive because you've got to build new freeways, new trains, new towns, new schools, new health centres with it. So what the government is wanting is to densify our middle ring suburbs and have urban renewal in the inner suburbs and changing some of the industrial land and some government land. And interestingly, even some golf courses. We've got lots of great
Mhm.
golf courses. Don't let Pam hear that. She'll be very disappointed if she
She
hears
will.
we're going to change golf courses into apartment buildings. And it has the concept, it wants to build 20-minute neighbourhoods around Australia. It knows the importance of that.
Yeah, so those infrastructure and lifestyle appeal, we always talk about walkability and what's on your doorstep and that 20-minute neighbourhood, they're really going to outperform.
Yes, yeah. So the concept of a 20-minute neighbourhood is that within 15, 20 minutes, you've got most of the facilities you want. Now, sure, you may have to travel further for your job, but in preference, even if jobs are local, so not all jobs are in the CBD. In fact, 80% of the jobs in our capital cities are in the suburbs. Just think the local shops, the nursing homes, the hospitals, the supermarkets, just go down the main street, all the shops there. So you're looking for jobs nearby, but also other facilities, especially since land's getting smaller. So parks, recreation facilities, houses of worship, picture theatres. So a 20-minute neighbourhood doesn't just have an IGA, but has a Woolworths and a
Mm.
Coles and an Aldi. You've got some choices of things as well. And the government says it wants to build a whole lot of 20-minute neighbourhoods right around Australia. Now, some people would be thinking, well, do you actually need that when you've got your neighbourhood on your phone nowadays? Everyone's communicating that way. I would argue that you do, because there's a lot of lonely people in our cities. So we actually want them to be able to get out of their home and interact with other people and have social activity in these neighbourhoods. Now, a lot of the inner suburbs of Melbourne are set for that and are already that way. I think it's going to be much harder in some of the outer suburbs where the infrastructure isn't there, Brett.
Yeah, well, look, you and I always say follow the infrastructure. And I guess the game changer in Brisbane that really sparked the market were the Queen's Wharf project, the second runway at the airport. There was 3 or 4 big infrastructure projects. What are the game-changing projects that investors should keep an eye on in Melbourne?
Well, they make a lot of news in Melbourne. They may not as much for people in other states because they all run so far over budget, and the media loves hounding the government for that. So we've got a suburban rail loop. So rather than up to now, we've had a central station in town and then spokes out like spokes of a wheel to all the various suburbs. And that's the way one would get around Melbourne. So if you wanted to go by public transport from a southeastern suburb, you'd actually have to go in town first before you went to the northeastern or northwestern suburbs. Now they're building, and it's going to take over a decade, a rail loop. Now, this has worked so well overseas, where in Europe and in London, they've got tubes and they've got rail loops. So that will, in the future, create a lot of easing of pressure on transport and a whole lot of new transport nodes around the stations of this rail loop around it. So what they're doing is in the suburbs where the stations are, and they start in Cheltenham, where you and I have got investment properties, to Glen Waverley, where I've got properties, to Box Hill, where a lot of our clients have. They've actually changed the density in those areas around these rail stations to allow more density so people can easily access them. We've got metro tunnels. Finally, probably, hopefully, we're going to have a railway to the airport. I know Brisbane
The
has got a
strange concept.
fantastic railway to the airport,
Yes,
and we've
yes.
used, not now, I use an Uber now, but in the past, I've hopped on a train at the airport and gone right into the centre of town. Can't do
Yep.
that in Melbourne yet.
No, it's strange. Same as Sydney.
And we're upgrading our roads, and that's a challenge, because when they do that, the roads are closed down for a while, and we're building new hospitals. So with infrastructure, Brett, a lot of people think about that hard infrastructure of roads and rail, but we've also got more the soft infrastructure we're going to have to build as well, such as health facilities, hospital, aged care. What about schools for all these people? That's one of the things that I'm wondering about, because we're wanting young families to come in from overseas who are at working age so that they're paying the taxes and replacing the retiring baby boomers or the millennials who are leaving the workforce and going to have babies. And these workers are also going to be having families. And so a number of years ago, the Kennett government in Australia got rid of a lot, in Melbourne, I should say, got rid of a lot of our schools. And that may have been appropriate at the time, but we've got to now educate all these people. So I think in the future, our schools aren't going to have the huge footy fields and playgrounds. There's no room to put them. We're probably going to have vertical schools like we have seen in other countries overseas, Brett.
Well, I can vouch for that, Michael, because I had an open day at one of my son's potential schools, and they're looking to expand their offering and broaden the number of classes they've got in each year. And they've actually bought a warehouse a street away and knocked it over, and now it's actually a 6-level classroom. So you're 100% right. The other thing you mentioned there is hospitals. Hospitals aren't hospitals anymore. They're hospitals with a research for mental health or research for cancer or those types of things. So there's specialty types of things as well. And they're really big resource hubs, and they attract a huge amount of jobs. So all of this infrastructure and upgrade, that produces the right conditions for capital growth, right?
Well, basically, you said it a second ago, they create jobs. Firstly, the jobs during the construction phase, but also then further on. If you've got easier public transport, easier accessibility, that makes the location more livable, but all the jobs around the schools, the hospitals, the aged care facilities. And if all these people live in these new areas, the upgraded middle ring suburbs, it's going to require more cafes, more restaurants, more supermarkets, more service facilities, more doctors, more dentists. So it's going to create a whole lot of new jobs. But what we do at Metropole is actually look at locations where higher paying jobs are there, A, for tenants, because we want tenants to be able to keep paying higher rent, but B, for owner occupiers, gentrifying areas, bringing in more income, Brett.
Yeah, and I guess they're just going to have to create more of those kind of hubs and those regional, cities, not regional areas, but those hubs in and around that CBD, because those regional pockets have an abundance of land. They're far too far away, and people don't want to do that. They're willing to trade all of that space for the right place, the right area, the right location where they can be within 20 minutes to their shops, their schools, their restaurants. They can cycle to work. They can have a trip at the park with their family on a bit of public transport and things like that as well. And that's going to
Well,
become
that's that
incredibly important.
20-minute neighbourhood we spoke about, which
Yeah.
I live in and you live in, but a lot of suburbs don't yet. So it's all a nice idea. The government has got, the urban planners know the right thing to do. The question is, are they going to have the money and the funds, and is the local councils or the local NIMBYs going to prevent this happening? That'll be interesting.
It will be. That'll be a continual arm wrestle. And look, you did touch on medium kind of density there as well, and that missing middle. Is that going to be part of the solution?
Well, yes, medium density dwellings are going to have to occur. In other words, duplexes, townhouses, and boutique apartment blocks in the middle ring suburbs, part of the government's plan to fill the housing gap. It's always been the plan to build more of these, but local councils have objected to it. So the local councils currently are the ones that provide development approval. And the local councillors are elected to well, in many cases, let's call them NIMBYs, not in my backyard, and also notes not over there either. And so what the state government in Victoria is doing, and it's happened in New South Wales as well, is actually taking away some of the planning ability from local councils. They're going to give them more money if they do allow these developments, and actually take away their planning approval rights if they don't. So in Victoria, the government has said, hey, in these suburbs, in these locations, we're going to allow developers to build large developments, and Mr. Council Officer, you have no say. You cannot knock it back. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to be financially viable and developers can do that, because they've got to amalgamate a whole lot of blocks. You've seen that yourself in Brisbane as well, where the zoning has allowed more medium and high density development. I think when people come back to 2050 in Australia, to Melbourne, you won't recognise that there's going to be a lot more medium and high density development. But I'm not suggesting that's the right place for investors. In fact, we know that a lot of supply is the enemy of increasing values. But I think townhouses, duplexes, and even smaller medium density boutique family friendly apartments are going to be in strong demand. And that's the way people are going to live. As you said before, they're going to trade space way out there with the front and backyard for balconies and courtyards.
Yeah, and look, I see that real window of opportunity right now because it's going to take a long, long time for these townhouses and villas and duplexes to kind of come about. But there's just so much demand in the next 4 to 5 years for that kind of property. So real opportunity at the moment.
Yes, it definitely is. Now, it's the stage of the cycle where development isn't as financially feasible for developers to build, to sell, to pay GST, to pay agents commission. But we know, and I know that you're running a property development workshop in Sydney in a couple of weeks' time. So I'm going to leave a link in the show notes for people to have a think about joining you there, and Greg Hankinson and Leanne and Lachlan Myrams, about how ordinary investors can become what we call armchair developers and get involved in these smaller developments. And if you're not building with the intention of selling and therefore having to pay taxes and GST, but if you're wanting to buy your next developments wholesale, that's the way that you and I and a lot of our clients for many years have actually built our wealth. So yes, I agree with you. There's huge opportunity for people to get involved in small property developments ahead of the crowd. So Brett, what would you say to investors who are nervous about this, though, who are thinking, yeah, that's all very far away. There's so many mixed messages at the moment. There's so much uncertainty.
Yeah, look, it's so true. But to be honest, Michael, I've never seen the fundamentals so lopsided and one sided. There's just so much demand coming through the pipeline, coming through, and there's just no supply. So I think those fundamentals have never ever been stronger. And look, there's always going to be short term noise. I mentioned before we're probably through the election now, and the interest rates and the long weekends, and we've got the tax time coming up. But once we get through that, I really believe there's going to be a smooth window of opportunity to really take advantage of this in such a short period of time. And at the end of the day, those longer term fundamentals and demographics will always win.
Yes, they will. And I think that's one of the messages that I'd like to share with viewers and listeners, that you've got to look at the long-term fundamentals and tune out the noise, because the media is not your friend. The media is not there to educate you. I guess in many ways it's there to entertain you.
Yeah, look, Michael, we had this discussion the other day, but maybe we could share it with our viewers. We talked a little bit about that longer term view in Melbourne. And if you were looking to buy somewhere now with a 20 plus year view, where would you buy?
Well, I still believe that the wealthy and the more affluent and the gentrifying suburbs are going to remain the ones that are in the middle ring of Melbourne. The inner ring gentrified uh, 20, 30 years ago, or even up to 10 years ago, the small terraces and the industrial properties changed to become a more funky Fitzroy's and the South Melbournes and the Albert Parks in Melbourne. And now the middle ring suburbs, here where there are big houses, and as the baby boomers slowly right size, and over the next 20 years, many of them are going to die off, their houses are going to be replaced by villa units, by townhouses, really, rather than villa units and medium density developments. I'd be staying in those more affluent areas rather than further and further out where, yes, it's a little bit cheaper, but there are still good opportunities in Melbourne's east and southeast, a little bit different to Brisbane and Sydney, where the north side of the river and the south side of the river in Brisbane, there's great areas everywhere. There's no doubt that the inner north and western suburbs have gentrified and have improved. But in general, people who live in Melbourne's north and west aspire to live in the east and southeast. People who live in the east and southeast don't wake up in the morning and say they want to go to the other side of Melbourne. So there's opportunities everywhere, but what we want to do is look at areas that are gentrifying and where they're going to be improving and where there's going to be those lifestyle 20-minute neighbourhoods, Brett.
Yeah, and what kind of properties should investors focus on?
Well, as investors, we tend to think about tenants, but in fact, I'd be looking at properties that have got owner-occupier appeal. Not that you want to sell them, but that other owner-occupiers are going to be buying similar properties and pushing up the value of your property. And also areas where affluent tenants want to rent those properties. We have a lot of townhouses that we've developed for our clients at Metropole and more affluent areas. And there's no shortage of affluent tenants who want to rent, even though they can afford to buy. Some are rent investors because they rent in those areas to put kids in the school zone, or because they're at a particular stage of their life, gone through marriage or divorce or come to Australia. So I'd be looking for properties with owner-occupier appeal, family friendly, a level of scarcity, make sure that there's not huge development going to come up right next door to you. So be careful about zonings in those areas, and something a little bit unique and special and different. Or if you've got the financial capacity, buying something with development approval to actually over the time pull down and build new townhouses. Now, some people say, I don't even know how to do that.
Yeah.
Well, we do. We've been doing that for a long time. I've been doing it for 40 years, and Greg Hankinson and our team have been helping clients for a number of decades. So if you're interested in taking advantage of this, I'd suggest you have a chat with the property strategists at Metropole. Go to metropole.com.au and have a wealth discovery chat just to see what your options are. Now, by the way, Brett, we're talking a lot about Melbourne here, but let's make it clear there are are opportunities in other parts of Australia as well. So when you come to Metropole, we're not going to say Melbourne, Melbourne only, are we?
No, definitely not. Definitely not. Particularly if you've already got assets in Melbourne, there's the diversification. There's some more land tax things in Melbourne and different price points. There's other opportunities at various price points as well.
Sure. So, Brett, I think this has been a good discussion,
Yeah.
but let me throw a question at you to finish off our chat. What do you think one of the biggest mistakes investors are going to make over the next couple of years?
Yeah, look, that's a really interesting question. I think a lot of investors have got it right in the last 5 years, Michael. Every property in Australia has gone up in value, so they've got to be very careful. I think my biggest piece of advice is the next form of offense is probably going to be defense. So you've got to come back to long-term fundamentals, come back to basics. You can't just go out and buy anything anymore. You can't go out and afford to buy chasing cash flow over capital growth, buying the wrong type of property. And I think particularly at the moment, it's not just a cliche. I think taking too long. I think if you're thinking about it into this year, at the end of this year, start of next year, and then into 6 months after that, I think you would have probably missed that opportunity of the turning of the market, particularly in Melbourne. There's some policies coming up in January. There's some interest rate cuts coming along. So a perfect opportunity right now just to see how you're placed. You don't have to take action, but let's see where the goalposts are and what your target is.
Now, really interestingly today, Brett, a couple of hours ago, I spoke with clients, husband and wife of Asker, one of our wealth strategists, who are a little bit nervous and they wanted my thoughts and I gave it to them. But when I looked at their record, they actually came to speak to us in 2016. That's 9 years ago. And they were nervous then, and the media was saying it was the top of the boom and it was the wrong time. And boy, did he regret not taking action then. Who wouldn't have liked to buy a property anywhere in Australia 8, 9, 10 years ago? So I think now's the right time as well. So you've heard it here. Melbourne's growing fast, and that growth already people are taking opportunity to take advantage of that. So if you're serious about building a strategic, future-proof property portfolio, why not start with a complimentary wealth discovery chat with one of our team at Metropole? It's your chance to review your current situation, clarify your investment goals, and get a clear, personalised roadmap before moving forward. So we've got no properties for sale. We're much more than just another buyer's agency. What we do is help our clients grow, protect, and pass on their wealth to future generations. So just go to metropole.com.au and book a complimentary consultation today, because with 9 million people on the way, the best time to act is before the crowd catches on. Thanks
Isn't that
again, Brett.
amazing? Thank you.
Yes,
Absolutely
yes.
amazing.
Well, I'd want to get in before those extra 4.5
Me
million
too.
people do, Brett.
Me too. Me too.
Thanks again, Brett. Look forward to chatting with you again next week.
As always, thank you.
Now here's Michael's mindset message. Remember, a change in your thinking will lead to a change in your life.
In today's mindset message, I want to ask you, would you really trade your life with them? We've all had those moments. You scroll through social media, you read a glowing profile in a business magazine, or you watch somebody speak on stage with charisma, with power, what seems to be effortless success. And in the back of the mind, a little voice says, wow, I wish I had what they had. But here's the question that changed everything for me. Would you actually trade lives with the person you're admiring? Not just their wealth, not just their house, their car, their accolades or the applause. I mean everything. Their schedule, their health, their stress, their marriage or lack of one, their internal world, the pressure they carry, the sacrifices they made, the parts of their life they don't like, parts they don't post on LinkedIn, because everything comes at a price. You see, there's the things you see and what it costs. Here's what I've learned over the years. Most people we envy, the icons of success we read about, we watch, we praise, are almost never living the lives I'd actually want to live. Yes, they may have wealth. Yes, they may have built something impressive, but often it comes with a hidden cost. Relationships that fall apart, health that deteriorates under stress, freedom traded for obligations, joy postponed or forgotten altogether. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not judging that. Some of these people are fully at peace with their choices, but the point is you need to be clear on what you're really admiring, because success is never free. I guess that's the comparison trap. So next time you find yourself comparing, next time envy sneaks up while you scroll through things, ask yourself, would I want to carry their burdens, not just their bank balance? Would I trade their full life for mine, not just their highlights? Would I be willing to pay the same price they did? Remember, I've often said what you see on social media is the highlight reel, not all the bits on the cutting room floor. And more often than not, your answer to those questions I just asked her, no, I wouldn't trade. That's when you realize that you don't want their life. You just want certain outcomes, but you have the power to define what success looks like for you on your terms. So my message to you in this mindset session is maybe it's time you stop chasing other people's versions of success and start honoring the ones that you're quietly building with intention. The one for health, for family, for freedom, for peace of mind. They've all got a seat at the table. So before you admire somebody else's journey, just ask, would I trade my whole life for theirs? If not, you're probably doing better than you think you are. Thank you for spending the last little while with me. I hope you got some benefit from this show. But before you move on to the next podcast you're going to listen to, let me remind you I have another show that I produce once a week with leading demographer Simon Kirstenmacher. We call that Demographics Decoded, where Simon and I unveil the trends that are going to shape your future. In my mind, this is a must-listen to podcast for anyone interested in property investment, but also for business people and entrepreneurs. So if you don't currently subscribe to Demographics Decoded, just please stop for a second and subscribe on your podcast app where you're listening to this or on YouTube. And of course, if you don't subscribe to this show, the Michael Yardney podcast, why not click the link that says follow or subscribe wherever you're listening right now. So twice a week, you're going to get benefit from my guests and me. And I'd like to ask you a little favour, please. If you did enjoy today's show and you know somebody who would also benefit, please tell them about the Michael Yardney podcast and Demographics Decoded. There's a share button on every podcast app. On Apple Podcasts, there are 3 little buttons at the top of the player. Or just tell them about it. Just have a chat with them. Now, I hope you're going to be doing them a favour, and you're definitely going to be doing me a favour in my quest to help as many people as possible to become financially literate. And by the way, I've got a special bonus for you. As my way of saying thank you for subscribing, just go to podcastbonus.com.au. There'll be a link in the show notes, podcastbonus.com.au, where I've got a bunch of ebooks and reports. It's just my way of saying thank you for taking the time to listen. And remember, the information that we give you in this podcast is general information, not specific information about your personal circumstances, because we don't know about them. But if you do want specific information, you can always have a chat with my team at Metropole. Go to metropole.com.au. If you really want to learn more, you can always listen to the previous podcast, the many episodes we've already published. Just go back to the old episodes, which each have lessons about property investment, success, and money. Once again, thanks for listening to today's show.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Michael Yardney podcast, which was brought to you by Metropole, who help their clients grow, protect, and pass on their wealth through strategic property and wealth advice. If you like what you heard and don't already subscribe, you'll find us on iTunes or on your favourite Android app as the Michael Yardney podcast. Watch out for our next show, which comes to you twice a week, and you'll learn some new ideas about property investment, success, and money in around 30 minutes. To get more of Michael's thoughts, go across to www.propertyupdate.com.au and sign up for his daily morning briefing, and you'll hear from not only Michael, but a group of leading property success and money experts. And just a reminder that the information you heard in this show today is general educational advice and not specific investment advice, as we don't know your personal circumstances. If you're looking for specific advice, why not ask the team at Metropole to help you?